Okay, well, welcome everybody for our third and final day in this particular SEO for Developers series on Live with Search Engine Land. My name is Detlef Johnson. I'm editor-at-large with Search Engine Land, and I'm spearheading the SEO for Developers content there, both in columns and in our sessions at conferences, which now also includes Live with Search Engine Land, which is a great thing that has grown out of the recent times that we're living in right now. So this is the third in 3 interactive sessions, including discussions, live coding, and Q&A with experts who are knowledgeable in coding and how that coding affects your SEO. We've been very lucky enough to, pull from a wide array of experts so far, people who speak from the agency representative side to in-house SEO practitioners to folks that are managing code for a whole platform and demonstrating how you can create search engine friendly HTML, CSS, and JavaScript from scratch. And then yesterday's was terrific run through Puppeteer and all the things you can do as a tech SEO who has some development skills with Puppeteer. And finally, now we have the expert from Google, one of the great guys from Google who are doing a lot of things out in the community, Martin Splitt. He's here. He's developer advocate with Google. Welcome, Martin. Thank you for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to today's session.
Hi, Detlef. Hi, everyone out there. Thanks so much for joining, and thanks to Search Engine Land for having me. I'm really excited about this event and this format. So, yeah.
Yeah, and once again, we'll be answering audience questions, so feel free to add questions to the live Q&A and chat. In fact, we really encourage it because this is going to be largely driven by questions and thoughts that you put into the chat. So if you don't see it at first, scroll way down the page. It's apparently it's towards the bottom. So go ahead and do that and enter your questions there, and we'll get them served up right up here. So thank you for that. Please do so. All right. So today we're going to talk about primarily, this renaissance with JavaScript is this explosion of content, and Google's response to the explosion of content, particularly JavaScript content, and how meaningful and important JavaScript is to the Google company as a whole. You guys have a lot of projects going, yeah. tremendous amount of projects, and all really widely used and extremely valuable for web developers and more than just web developers. So JavaScript is pretty fundamental to the company, and it's great to have you on here as one of the progenitors of those projects. I think you work a lot on I think you do a lot of Puppeteer. Don't you contribute to Puppeteer?
A little bit, not that much. I mostly maintain Rendertron when it comes to open source, the open source side of things. But that uses Puppeteer, so I am familiar with Puppeteer. I did help them with the migration of the docs from custom Markdown to the TS doc format. Yeah, so yeah.
That's right. Rendertron is the project you primarily contributed to. And so we're going to be talking about how JavaScript developers might be getting into trouble doing things on their sites that aren't search engine friendly. And it's really, they don't intend to cause problems. They're using, tools and frameworks and libraries that are commonplace, and they're just getting things working, which is the primary job of a developer, is get this application working in the first place. But it can oftentimes lead to things that aren't seen in Google. And when marketing becomes paramount to an effort at a startup or whatever, then they sort of find themselves maybe with some technical debt on the JavaScript front. So we're here to try to help head off some of that technical debt.
Yes. Really looking forward to see what people are running into, because as you explained, like a bunch of people are building stuff using JavaScript, and there are so many options to pick from and so many things. And it's what's cool about the web, especially recently in the last couple of years, is that everyone can enter the web ecosystem and become a contributor. It's not like with app development, you have quite a few hurdles to jump through to build mobile apps, for instance, whereas with the web ecosystem, it is becoming easier and easier. And at this point, unless you want to do like professional grade websites, then you literally, all you need is a browser, right? You just need a browser, and then you can get going. And that is cool and amazing, and I'm really happy that we have that. On the other hand, it also means that we need to meet people where they come from, and not everyone is necessarily aware of all the history, and neither should they be aware of all the backlog of history and stuff. And so they might not be aware of all the aspects that they should consider. And then people draw themselves into corners. And then, if it's a professional grade job, as in like you're trying to help a customer, a client, your own business, then you might easily end up having painted yourself into a corner and needing to like figure out how to back out of that. And that's not necessarily easy. And I'm trying to make that as easy as possible and provide as much context as possible from the search side of things. Organic search traffic being one important driver of traffic to websites. So I'm here to hear from you. What are you all struggling with? What is it that I can show you? What is it that puzzles you when you deal with developers, or if you're a developer yourself, that puzzles you regarding SEO, especially when you deal with JavaScript?
And it's fair to say it used to be harder or worse before the evergreen Googlebot, came out as an advent with Google, where the Googlebot crawler now keeps pace with the releases of Chrome itself, which is terrific, because prior to that, the problems were myriad. They were as bad as could be, really. And we should keep in mind also that while we have evergreen Googlebot, this is for Google. JavaScript developers still have to pay very close attention to the fact that it's great for Google, but we have also other crawlers out there, social media crawlers and the other search engine crawlers that, although Bing is on board with Google, but the evergreen, they're on board with that, aren't they? So they're able to crawl the stuff. But when it comes to Facebook and Twitter, I don't think they're going to be adopting evergreen anytime soon. Maybe they will, right? That would be nice.
I mean, I can't speak for them. I don't know if maybe tomorrow they're like, yeah, we do it, or if next year we'll have the same conversation about that. We'll see. But yeah, right. That's a challenge.
And they're mainly looking for like the open graph tags and stuff to power whatever it is. So they're looking for that anyway. So that the crawling issue is a little bit different because they're not indexing.
But they run into the same problem as everyone else who wants to process web content. Back in the day, before JavaScript became a main factor in web content development or web application development, you would basically make a network request, an HTTP request to the server, get the entire content back. Maybe like the JavaScript would add some animations. You don't care about that if you want to look at the content. You would scrape by literally just making HTTP requests, getting the HTML back, and then looking into the HTML for whatever part of the content you would be interested in. Whereas with the advent of JavaScript, client-side JavaScript frameworks mostly, we have shifted towards building applications, and it became kind of like a cool field of innovation, where we are no longer just putting documents on the web like, oh, where is this restaurant? What do they have on the menu? And when are they open? But we are like, okay, I can actually create presentations online. I can create photo albums online. I can create guest books online. All this kind of stuff would be more application focused or application centric. And now you can't just like look at the HTML, because then for those, and a photo book is content. In the end, you want the images, but you can't just make an HTTP request, because that would only give you like empty HTML and a bit of JavaScript. You would have to run the JavaScript. The environment that JavaScript is traditionally run in is the browser, and the browser is aimed at visually presenting the content to a user. It is not aimed as being programmatically consumed, as in like a computer program can't that easily. There were already hacks long ago, but like basically everything was a hack in terms of trying to get the browser to be used by a program rather than a human. That has changed fundamentally with the advent of Selenium back in the day. That has also been a little shaky and it didn't get the love it deserved from the browser vendors, I would say. And now we are with the looking at the things like the WebDriver API or Puppeteer, actually, which is exposing the Chrome Developer Tools protocol, which allows you to programmatically, so a program can use Chrome to do things and interact with pages, which also makes it easier to execute JavaScript in the browser and then get the content that is created by the JavaScript. Puppeteer also works with Firefox, and I'm pretty sure once more browsers adopt the WebDriver, we'll probably see other products as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, and in the scope of things, you brought up, really great antiquated ideas like guest books, which in the old days was powered probably by a Perl program, or PHP.
PHP or Perl, yeah.
Yeah, and so those are all processed on the server. I mean, PHP itself stands for pre-hypertext, processor, and so processing. So these things basically ship the end HTML, which may or may not contain any JavaScript, to the browser. In those old days, when you really go back, there was no JavaScript.
Yeah.
So JavaScript was invented as a language that would be interpreted and executed on the browser inside the local CPU unit, not the remote server that you're calling and fetching content from. This is stuff that you're downloading, and it runs on your own computer through the browser. And therein lies the amazing opportunity for JavaScript developers in those days to create things, animations, and neat JavaScript tricks, DHTML tricks and stuff. And then
DHTML, I haven't heard that in a while. Yeah.
Oh yeah, where you would have like a tracer on your cursor going across the browser to make effects like magic. And then finally jQuery, which was really a tremendous revolution in its day, and it's still going strong and not going away anytime soon. jQuery has had a recent version released a few months ago, where finally web developers were able to use a JavaScript library that would do all these animated things that were DHTML was a solution for prior. It would be like, you can drag and drop things. You can, have fade in, fade out, kind of all of those animations and effects were things that jQuery was a great library for, but you had to download this giant bundle of JavaScript and the whole thing would execute on the browser. Now Node, which is the next big innovation and one that may eclipse jQuery right now in the discussions anyway, is that finally you have a JavaScript project, where the JavaScript not just runs on the browser, but it brings it home to the server. And the opportunity there is tremendous because all of these other languages, PHP, Perl, Ruby, whatever you're programming in, is server-side technology that you generate your whole HTML and ship it to the browser. Now you've got JavaScript that can be running in the browser, JavaScript that can be running in the server, and the two can communicate. And that's why we have now reactive programming. Hence the name React for the big framework by Facebook, and onward from there to Vue, Angular, and now Svelte. Have you looked at Svelte at all?
I haven't really looked at Svelte yet. It's on my list, and I hope that I find some time during the summer eventually to actually take a closer look. It sounds pretty cool. It sounds coming back to the sounds like it's coming back to the idea of trying to do as much as is reasonable on the server, and then focusing the browser side work on what the browser is exceptionally good at. So I'm really looking forward to see if that is an interesting. I think it's an interesting evolution. I hope that I want to see if it actually keeps its promises, and I also want to see what others are taking from it, because I'm pretty sure what we have seen in the last couple of years is that these different frameworks have been cross-pollinating each other. So I know that the first couple of single-page application frameworks, such as Backbone and the first version of Ember and Sprout Core and what they are all called, and Knockout, some of them try to create an abstraction layer over the browser in the wrong way, as in they're like, oh, don't mind the browser, basically just program as if you're on a server and program as if you are using JavaScript such as you would in a server-side environment a little bit. Until then, AngularJS, the first version of AngularJS came out, and then kind of was like, no, you know what? No, you'll just use HTML and then sprinkle some reactivity and JavaScript on top of it, and then that's like, it's still valid HTML, and you would leverage what HTML has to offer, but then get the interactivity on top of it. And then React is like, you know what? How about you could write a program as if it were a server-side JavaScript program, but still kind of use HTML just as in a different way, just using these new cool template strings and this additional abstraction layer of the virtual DOM that abstracts away some of the more gnarly historic bits of the browser. And I think that was really cool. And then we saw Angular 2 was borrowing ideas from other frameworks, and then Vue came around, and basically like they were all cross-pollinating as far as I can tell. And I'm pretty sure that if we are moving forward, then we'll see more of that, and we'll see the next evolution. I have no idea how that's going to look like, but I'm really looking forward to see where we are taking this.
Yeah, Svelte in a brief nutshell, it's reached version 3, and that's the one that everyone is raving about. And because it's a giant leap forward, and what it does is it basically compiles on the server, and it then generates the reactive JavaScript that looks like plain vanilla. That's what's shipping. And then you, instead of there's no JSX or anything, although they just recently TypeScript is now supported.
Oh, okay.
But
that's compiled away as well. So
right, but you just use HTML, and then if you put CSS and stuff, it's scoped to that component. So if you're, it's kind of nice, and it's scoped because it's all compiled on the server, and so that's how it does its scoping. And then there's a $: which allows you to create statements and bindings that use invalidate. So whenever there's a variable change, or whenever you assign a value and it's bound to other values, they all change because of invalidate.
Oh, right. That's nice.
And so that's how it works to be reactive.
That's pretty cool.
It's a pretty cool paradigm. That's it in a nutshell. I think
it sounds nice, because it's like it boiled down the reactivity system to the smallest necessary client-side component, and tries to solve the things that should better be solved server-side in the server-side, which is fantastic if it works well enough. That's the big. It's like, I've seen in my career, I've seen so many ideas that sounded fantastic on paper and then in practice didn't quite work out. So we'll see.
There aren't too many production apps yet, and you're not going to find too many jobs offers people looking for Svelte programmers yet. But it's growing rapidly, and the progenitor there is Rich Harris. He works at New York Times, and so all of those graphics that are reactive, that change with data, are all powered by Svelte components.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing with early stage things; they can go either way. I mean, we've seen a few frameworks pop up, and then a few people were like, "Ooh, this is amazing," and then the frameworks didn't go very far. And then other frameworks like Vue started small and is now one of the big 3 players. So anything can happen. This is the interesting thing about web technology. Anything can happen. You don't know where it's going, and the thing is, that's also a little bit of a downside, because some people try to like learn everything that is there and then get frustrated by everything changing. And I'm like, but that's not a necessity. There's just a small group of very loud people on social media and GitHub who are like, no, you have to rewrite everything into this framework that just came out. I'm like, no, if it works for you, if your application does what it needs to do, and you don't have pains that are caused by the framework rather than by the way that you are architecting or building your applications, then you don't have to change. It's not, what's the point? The point is to be productive, stay productive, and deliver customer solutions. Changing my framework from A to B is not a customer solution. It's only valid if it really solves the pain of maintainability. And if maintainability is bad in your project just because of the code that you wrote, not the framework code, then that's not a good reason to change the framework. It's a reason to educate yourself on how to properly structure your application in the framework at hand. Yeah.
Got a bunch of questions.
Oh yeah.
Including, you have a scheduled tweet that went out and caught you there on that. I don't know what it is that went out, but
Yeah.
Barry noticed it.
Barry noticed it. Of course, Barry noticed it. Hi,
Of
Barry.
course.
So we are working on a new event that will be happening in late August, and I just saw the promo video that we recorded in the certain cut. Like I think it's fine cut at this point, and I'm really excited about it, and I hope that everyone else will be excited about it. But I won't disperse to some keen eyes might know what this event is because I did once spill a few more beans, but I won't spill the more beans here now.
I always wait for the announcement because, then that's always the good thing, is because if it's going to be good, the announcement will make it so, and I'll see if I can make it. Someone asked about BingBot Evergreen, and how does it compare with crawling.js? I don't suppose you have any insights. I would just assume that they have a lot of their own back end work that they would have to do to, connect to it.
I think they might be able to benefit from the fact that a lot of what the Evergreen Googlebot is using is in Chromium. And now that Edge uses Chromium, they probably get similar capabilities and access to similar APIs as what they might have used beforehand in Edge. And I know from our team, as I said, I can't comment on what Bing does or how they do it or what the status of the Evergreen Bing bot is in terms of rendering. What I can tell is that you might remember before Evergreen Googlebot, you said like we were stuck on Chrome, on an old version of Chrome for quite a while. And that's because it's intends to deploy a headless browser solution, which is what you need to render JavaScript websites when you have to modify the browser, because browser versions come out relatively frequently these days. It used to be like, oh, you get a new version of Windows that has a new version of Internet Explorer. So every couple of years, you get a new version of Internet Explorer, maybe. Whereas now it's like every couple of weeks, every couple of months, you get a new version of your browser. So that means that you need to like keep maintaining the modifications that you need to do to actually be able to use the browser in your rendering infrastructure. And we solved this problem. Our rendering team solved this problem publicly in open source mostly, which I think is fantastic. It's amazing. I'm really grateful for that. And I can only hope that the Bing team can benefit from that as it is part of Chromium and thus part of Edge as well. And maybe that helps them as well, which would be cool. That would be really cool.
Benefit the whole web.
Yeah. I'd rather have us all solve new complicated problems that we are all facing than reinventing the wheel, right? So if they use Chromium in Edge, that's, I think, a good thing.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So Trevor asks, and we began talking a lot about frameworks. How do we handle React? Server side, static page generator like Gatsby, which is a React project. Mm-hmm. Does it matter as far as the crawler is concerned, which way we go with those things? And so really, it's more, yeah.
One of the most frequent questions. Thank you very much for asking, Trevor.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, and I hate to say it depends, so I'm trying to like build a more helpful answer around the fact that it does depend. I think, and I was going to say that earlier, but then somehow like forgot about it. When I said like, oh yeah, all these JavaScript frameworks came out and everyone built web applications because that was cool. Like people built, I don't know, like fake operating systems that ran in the browser with own applications and stuff. That's something where it makes absolute sense to run the JavaScript in the browser because you have a lot of interactivity that contributes to the value of the application. Imagine just thinking about let's go for a very simple, obvious use case that we probably all have encountered, which is Google Docs. Imagine you have Google Docs, but it has no JavaScript, which means you have a big text field. You type things into the text field, and then you press on save, and then the page reloads, and then it shows you the actual formatted output. And then you're like, oh, dang it, I made a mistake here. And then you press on edit, and then it reloads the page again. And then there's the text field, and then you type something in, you hit save again, it reloads, and then you see the actual, that's not a great experience. That's not what I would call a functional text editing suite, not an Office suite kind of thing. You'd be like, this is annoying. I want to actually use something like my regular Office program on the computer. So adding JavaScript there to give you like all these fancy bits and pieces where you like type in and you get it formatted, but then you can like change it and other people can collaborate in real time. I think that's really cool, and that makes perfect sense. And there is just no way of doing that without client-side JavaScript. You need, for like the instant responsiveness, you need JavaScript to run in the browser. But why would I, as a restaurant, when I make my website, need that client-side JavaScript? What for? Why is it there? What does it do? Oh, it makes the menu like fade in nicely. You can do that with CSS. You don't need JavaScript for this. So why do we see this? And I'll go back a little bit. A few jobs ago, long before I joined Google, I was in a company where we were evaluating different JavaScript frameworks, and we decided to go with Angular. And that was because we were building, for instance, a banking app in the browser. And that was a full-blown banking app with like lots of interactive bits and pieces. And we were like, yeah, it makes sense to use a web framework for this because it's an interactive application rather than a document. Everything was behind a login anyway, so indexability isn't a problem here. And then the problem was that was one project. We had other projects that also build web applications, so they all used this framework, which made sense for all of these projects. But then it became the company tech stack, which means that we were hiring lots of people who were experts in this, in Angular in this case. And then one person or two people or something were tasked to build the company website. So what did they do? They did what everyone else in the company did. They reached for Angular to build the company website. And then we were facing all sorts of problems. And we were like, why? Can I just quickly figure out why do we have Angular on this project? Well, right. It's the standard solution. Every project uses Angular. So and we thought it's a good tool. And I'm like, yeah, but not for this. You right. can. I mean, the website rendered in the browser, it looked fantastic. It had all sorts of flashy bells and whistles. But I'm like, it doesn't add anything here. Yeah, indexing was impossible, and also it didn't add anything.
And then it didn't add any. There's no reactive component on the page.
There wasn't. No, it was a blog where like once every couple of days someone would post a blog post that wouldn't change. There weren't comments. Yep. There was nothing there. It had like different projects listed. All of these were static descriptions, and that's just not great. But the problem that goes back again, like if it's the only tool that they had, it's the only tool that they were aware of. It's the shiny, cool thing that everyone on Twitter yells about. Today it would probably be React, or it would be Vue, or whatever. Right. So if you ask me if you should treat React server-side, or use a static site generator, or do it client-side, it depends on what you're building. If you are building some super interactive application where you need to have the JavaScript run in the client side. When I say that, I mean like, I don't know, a messenger where messages pop in without the page actually having to reload, or you build like an online auctioning platform where lots of things are dynamic and interactive, maybe then even as well. And then there's the gray area where I'm like, well, a bunch of it, like for instance, if it's an auctioning platform, then not that much of the content actually is interactive. The listing of the thing that you are looking at, the different auctions that are happening at the time, right now, that's something that can be built when I ask the server, hey server, give me all the auctions that run now. And then I give the initial version server-side rendered. So React would then run on the server side. I get the initial version server-side rendered, and then that's quick as well. And then I would use React in the client side as well. That is hydration, usually what it's the term you're looking for, server-side rendering plus hydration. That then says like, oh, this auction is ending in 2 minutes, 1 minute, and it's over. You click here to go back. And
so
React allows you to do that.
A couple of elements on the page are reactive, nothing else is.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can pre-generate the bits that are not reactive, and maybe also cache them so that it's even faster for the next person to click on that in like a minute later. And then there's like the things where so the problem there is in an auction platform, you don't know when things change. Any point in time, anyone can create a new auction. Any point in time, someone can delete a running auction given there's no bids. This kind of stuff, like things can happen at any point in time. It's user-driven. You have no control over when content changes. But if you build a website for your company, no random things can happen on there. You or one of your coworkers might write a new blog post. You or your coworkers might change the description of the services your company offers. You or someone in your team might add a new product to your website. Sure. But these are moments. First, they are very few. I'm pretty sure if you just have a a restaurant website won't edit things every hour. They might not even edit things every day. They might do one change a month.
Right.
So you have very clear moments. You have control over, I now know this is changing because someone in some sort of admin interface did something very specific deliberately, which means in that case, you can generate the static version of that content once, whenever it changes, and then upload that. And then you have none of the JavaScript effort anymore.
Right.
That's a static site generator or pre-rendering. And you can't pre-render if you're building an auctioning platform. What would you pre-render? How often do you pre-render? You can hypothetically like pre-render once a minute, but then what's the point? So it depends a little bit on what you're trying to build. And then I haven't even started discussing the search aspect of that, the SEO aspect of it.
Right,
that's just the thinking of an engineer.
Choosing technology, exactly.
Choosing the right technology for what you're trying to accomplish. Because the client-side approach is the kind of default approach for React. That's just how it is built, how it presents itself by default. So it's easier for developers to just do it because they literally just follow the first tutorial they find, and then that's what they come out with. But then they have to make sure that their JavaScript is indexable. It's not blocked by robots.txt. Their JavaScript needs to be fetched, which means it makes crawl requests, which means if you have a gigantic website, this might eat up a little bit of your crawl budget. It does mean that the browser has to perform things. If I am on an old phone, this is a new phone, but if you're on an old phone, then you might run into the situation that your browser is just very slow. And that means that if lots of JavaScript needs to be executed just to show me a restaurant website, I'm waiting forever. And that is not fantastic because, speed is one of the ranking factors.
It is.
And that's as much as I'll say about ranking today.
That's good.
And it's pointless to do that. You're hurting yourself. You're adding additional effort for everyone out there. Scrapers such as the social media bots, they won't see your open graph tags because they don't execute JavaScript at all. Things can go wrong. It's just more brittle. It's adding things that make no sense.
A restaurant menu is something that you want to code pretty statically. If you were to use React for that, you would be probably doing it with Gatsby, and it still would make no sense. It's like, why not just write a page and whatever?
If someone gets like super excited and is like, oh yeah, we're gonna use this headless CMS, and then we need to build a framework, a front end for it. Go with Gatsby, have fun, enjoy. Doesn't matter. It's fine. From a search engine perspective, at least from a Google search perspective, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. But if you can make it easier on the device of the user, which also means the crawlers, do it, right? Yeah. Does that mean that you can't build cool web apps that definitely need client-side JavaScript? No, go ahead. Go ahead. We are doing our best to be able to index them. We are able to index them just as well as other websites. But why would you choose a tool that isn't fit for the purpose?
Exactly. I think of the definition of the framework React or the library as defined by, it's a user interface builder. It's not a website builder. It's for building user interfaces.
Yeah.
And so if your web page doesn't have a user interface, although, you could easily say, but wait, it is a user interface, and you're why? Because it has links on it, buttons. I mean, the definition of user interface here is a little bit loose, but if you come down to that definition, you can say, well, am I really building a user interface, or am I building an interactive brochure for my website or my company, or an interactive menu that would allow someone to click on a dish and see the ingredients?
Yeah. And to answer Edward's follow-up question, is server-side rendering of a pure React app necessary to be indexed by Google? No. Does it help? Maybe a little bit. It makes things more robust. It makes things probably faster for the user if it's done right. But you don't have to server-side render. But again, if you are building something that is static, don't make people waste energy. You can also think about it from a waste of energy perspective. If content is only changing like once a week, why would you make, and you have 1 million visitors on your website, why would you make 1 million people spend their battery on running JavaScript that has no effect in the end besides creating the content that you could have created once when the content changed on your server? Or when the content changes in less controllable increments. Let's say like this auctioning platform gets one new auction every 5 minutes and sometimes only once a half an hour. Then you do that once a half an hour or once for every 5 minutes on the server. And then the 1 million people who come to your website get that rendered, server-side rendered version. It just
Tremendous
makes sense.
Waste. I mean, unless you're shipping a cryptocurrency miner.
That's a whole different league of evil.
Yes, it is. Because they do that.
People try to mine bitcoins on Google render infrastructure. Yeah, that does happen.
That's awful. Jesse asks, if the server delivers one correct canonical, but the client-side React helmet is adding a second for a page previously visited, will Google ever see the second incorrect canonical? I'm not sure I quite understand that question. Maybe can you get your head around that one?
I think I understand what they mean. What I'm assuming is that they have somehow the server injects a canonical URL or a canonical tag with a URL into the initial response, and then React Helmet upgrades it or changes it or adds a second one. I'm not sure. There is a possibility that we are seeing the helmet one, but then we are looking at, like, we are asking a question about a symptom, and there is a cause that needs to be addressed here. Why is React Helmet adding a canonical to something that already has a canonical? That's my first question. The second question would be, why is React Helmet generating an incorrect canonical?
Yeah.
That should just not happen.
It shouldn't happen.
I get these questions often, and I'm like, you are in an edge case situation that you shouldn't be in to begin with. Try to address the cause of this rather than fixing or investigating the symptom.
Maybe it has something to do with however they're doing it. They're shipping a standard canonical, but then it gets updated on the component, that the helmet updates it. So it's standard first, and then the second one.
Yeah.
So
it's like, server delivers a correct canonical, but client-side React Helmet is adding a second one for a page previously visited. Why is that? Why does it do that? Can your developers find out why that's happening? Is that a problem in React Helmet? Is it a problem in the way that because there might be a much more sinister and problematic root cause behind this that you should probably address. Because if something, in the end, we are trying to make the computer do what we want it to do, and then if it's misbehaving, then that means we don't understand what we have just created, and that's risky. And then it's like the app is not properly set up for SSR to include body content. I think that's okay. Devs say it's safe and Google will never see it. I say it's not safe and we might see it. And if you are moving to SSR, I would just make sure that you are either not using client-side injections of canonicals afterwards if your server already produces correct canonicals, or just make sure that the body part makes sense in the SSR as well. So that's something that you need to be careful with. Yeah.
So 3 things you think all SES should know about optimizing JavaScript. That's a pretty wide open thing.
Yes.
I'm sure there's more than 3, but the top 3 in your mind right at this moment.
Yeah. I think like the number 1 thing that I want to get out there is JavaScript is a tool. It's not good or bad per se. It's not something like, yeah, JavaScript, but it's not like, oh my God, no JavaScript. It's neither of these extremes make sense. Use JavaScript where it makes sense. If you're trying to put in a nail into something, use a hammer. A hammer is a good thing. If you use the hammer to basically hit someone on the head, not a great use of that hammer. Maybe don't do that. So yeah,
trying to hammer a screw.
Yeah, exactly. Don't or like use a hammer to cut down a tree. Like no,
yeah.
No,
wrong tool.
Doesn't make sense. Wrong tool for the job. So try to understand why JavaScript is used, and don't let developers get away with, oh, you know, it's just like, it's a fantastic framework, or oh, the developer experience is great. Developer experience should never top user experience. And heavy, expensive JavaScript is very easily the #1 cause of bad user experience. So that's a thing that you need to be aware of. That's one thing. The second thing is, don't try to be clever, because I've seen so many people who are like, oh yeah, but maybe we can use JavaScript to do this very special thing when Googlebot comes around, and then do like more JavaScript to solve this other problem here. And I'm like, no. Maybe step back and try to find the simplest possible solution for the problem. If it needs JavaScript, that is fine. But if you don't need JavaScript, then don't use JavaScript. And I've seen all sorts of things like people try to be clever around, oh, but if we can we use JavaScript to determine if it's a Google bot and then not serve the CSS of the page. Yeah, you can do that, but that is a horrible idea because it adds a lot of complexity for basically no or minimal gain.
Yeah. So
don't do that. And it doesn't even have to be JavaScript. It can also sometimes be like, oh, we roboted away the APIs. So the APIs are no longer eating up our crawl budget. Yeah, but if it is a client-side rendered JavaScript application, then that means that during rendering, we can't make requests to the API and we don't see your content. So not a great thing either. And the third thing is, do talk to your developers. Developers are not necessarily aware of the implications and impact that things have or how they can test things. Point them at the documentation, talk to them, ask them if they have anything for you to test, look at what they build and run it through the testing tools and see what you find. And also be aware that a lot of stakeholders and a lot of requirements come in when developers work on things, and be mindful of their time. If it's a tiny, I've seen it so many times, like, oh, we need to fix this because this page has no canonical and everything is terrible. And I'm like, but is it actually a problem? Is there actually a problem? Oh no, Google picked the right canonical anyway. So then maybe don't come running into the developer's room pretending that everything's on fire, when what you're looking at is definitely not fantastic, but it's not an emergency either. So those are like the 3 things that I would love people to be aware of when it comes to working with developers and working with JavaScript. From an indexing point of view, you don't have to do anything specific normally.
Now, from an indexing perspective and from a crawling perspective, there are things that you can, do in terms of like writing an on-click handler for links. And forget to or neglect to put in the href attribute because you're not, it's not important at that point. So here you're crafting links in JavaScript. And from a crawling perspective, how is that, how is that impeding? Obviously, without the href, and Google isn't going to generate an on-click event to trigger the handler. So, there are a lot of people that do this.
Yeah, and people ask me like, so why is Google not doing this? Why is it not just like using an on-click? Because I'm like, first things first. Have you thought about the people who use assistive technology and might not use a click event to begin with? They might just create a keyboard event, for instance. The other thing is, actually, I think keyboards trigger on-click events on links if you use an A tag. But then why would we create an on-click event if there is a right way of using the anchor tag, which is with an href that is a URL? And then the next thing is, it's surprisingly expensive, computationally expensive to create on-click events. Sounds fantastically stupid, but it's true. It's an incredible expense in terms of computing power, which means money, which means time as well, to do this. So no, just use links properly. That's the
maybe we can demonstrate a couple of these things. But if you have anything in mind in that regard, but also I wanted to talk to you briefly about, or maybe even more extensively, about the Web Vitals and the whole new. It's relatively new anyway. Web Vitals and those things coming, those new browser APIs that are giving us scores now, and will be ranking factor in 2021 at some point.
Mm-hmm. Page experience, yeah.
And so creating an on-click event handler, depending on where that on-click handler is located in your bundle, and when the JavaScript finally is able to interpret that so that it is ready with the handler and to respond, it may be some time before the user, clicks that and gets the handle, and that is first input delay.
Yeah, that's part of it. Also, what do you do if you are on yes, that's one thing. The other thing is also user experience wise, we can't really detect that automatically, but basically, if a user is on a spotty mobile connection, that one JavaScript doesn't load, but the rest of the page displays fine, and then you click on the thing and nothing happens. How frustrating is that?
Oh, it's terrible.
And so preventable.
Yeah. And, when you're not able to detect that automatically, you're still calculating up the task timings in order to come up with a score for first input delay on Web Vitals. That's how I understand it, how it works.
Yeah.
CPU thread blocking suckers. So
absolutely. And the larger the JavaScript bundle is, the longer it takes to process. It processes on the main thread, that blocks the main thread. Nothing else gets handled. So yeah, and that's not an option.
Right. Okay. So, do you have anything you'd like to share with us? A project?
If we don't have actually not a project, but if we don't have anything else lined up in terms of questions from the audience right now, then I saw like two things. One was like, if your content is hidden with a read more link or button or whatever, is it visible to Google search? Depends. Is it in the rendered HTML? Yes or no. If it's not in the rendered HTML before a user gesture, then we kind of address that. Like, we don't do user gestures such as clicks. So if it's only loaded and put in the DOM by user click, then no, we don't see that. And then like, why do some not have cache options? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for SEO. You shouldn't care about it. The cache is not a diagnostic tool. It's a tool to help if the website goes down. That's the situation you shouldn't be in. But if there's no other questions, sorry?
Most of the read more is usually shipped with the HTML. Do you see a lot when it's actually not in the?
I don't have data. I only have anecdotal evidence, and I have a bit of anecdotal evidence that they basically run a function that loads additional content into the DOM, which means we are not seeing it.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Generally, if people use like a library or a content management system or something, they implement it in a way that you would see the content because it's just hidden. But when people build it custom, they usually do it wrong.
Now, there are ways to do that that will negatively impact your cumulative layout shift as well. Because as you're doing things that are changing in the display, these are things that can build your cumulative score. Now, depending how you code it, it'll either not add to your score, which is great, or it will add as users interact with your page. Because your initial cumulative layout score that you get if you use a tool like PageSpeed Insights might be 0 or a very small score, 0.1. But as users, if you get your field data, which is data collected by Chrome users out in the wild, and they're collecting, and you guys are collecting in your repository, your Chrome user experience Crux report, you're collecting data there, and users, they might be navigating parts of your page that aren't events aren't triggered by the initial download. So you might see a score of 0.1, but in your field data, you're failing and you don't know why. And so that's a time when you're going to want to bring up, dev tools. There's the new Web Vitals Chrome extension, which I used to debug this very thing, is why I'm bringing it up. And it had to do with, well, why is the CLS score, cumulative layout shift, so bad in field data, but the Page Insights is practically 0? And it's because when you mouse over the navigation, they had a minus 9,999 positioned.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh no.
And then they had it animate into the screen. Okay, so because it's animating into the screen, it's like each step of the block coming in is adding. So it was like 0.5, each time you mouse over, and it adds. And it will add to the CLS when you mouse out. So mouse over, mouse out, add. And so the high score they were getting was almost like an indication of how much users were actually using
them. Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. There's plenty of opportunities like that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right. That was a fun one.
Yes. So I'm not sure how useful this is going to be, and I'm relying on audience participation here. So tell us if we are boring you or if things go over your head. We were discussing this pre-show. It is very hard for me to judge what makes sense for you all in terms of what I'm showing and teaching. So just give us live feedback on what you want to see more of or what we want to see less of. But I thought maybe it is interesting to see things from a developer's perspective, as in I found a ridiculous API that has all the information about Pokemon, and I have to admit that after the first 150 something Pokemon, I kind of lost track mostly. And then there's Next.js, which I haven't touched in a long while, so we could build like a little web app together, and you can ask me questions while we're doing this. I'll show you what I would look for and how I would make my decisions, and I also show you basically how I work with the documentation of any kind of technology and framework, which is something that you can all as well do. It's not, you don't have to be a developer, you don't have to be an expert on the thing. Lots of documentation has like really nice guided learning paths as well. We'll skip those today. But just to like show you how the sausage is made, kind of. If that's interesting, then we'll do that a little longer. If you're like, oh, that makes no sense to me, just let me know, and then we'll figure out how to proceed from there. If you have specific questions or specific things that you want to see in terms from of a developer's perspective, and yeah, we can do that.
And Next.js has terrific documentation and a terrific guide for quick start and getting up and running. I also haven't touched it in a while, although it's very popular.
It is quite cool. It is quite a nice and interesting solution. It is using React basically, but it is giving you a few more options in terms of how you want to architect and build your application. So I think this might actually be interesting to take a look at, and then I can show you how that would go. So to get going, basically, I discovered this lovely little API, and apparently you can ask for like all sorts of Pokemon. And for instance, here is an API call. If I take this URL, oh, hold on, can I actually copy the entire URL? Yes, I can. Haha. Like this, maybe. Let's start with like this. I think the original Pokemon were like 150 Pokemon or something. Let's actually see what happens when I just ask for all Pokemon. I think I literally just got. Did I get all the Pokemon? How many did I get?
Looks like you got a good response there.
Yeah, it's not all Pokemon, but it's quite a few. And I think like these are definitely the first couple of ones.
Can you increase
okay,
font size?
Yes, sure. Sorry, yeah, I keep forgetting that. Hold on, give me a second. So
thank you.
When we are asking for pokeapi.co/API v2 Pokemon, it automatically offsets by 20 and limits by 20. We can try out what happens when we use different offsets, and limit equals 100. Maybe we get like 100 instead of just offset 100. No, I wanted to set offset to 0. Interesting. Maybe offset is actually the beginning, because this is the first Pokemon and the ID seems to be 1. So we can list Pokemon. I wonder if I can get 150 as well. Yeah, that's quite a few. So I guess like that might be let's have a look at the whoa, okay. What the hell was that? Okay, my Chrome doesn't render as fast. 150.
Oh,
yes, so I get 150 Pokemon. That's fantastic. And then each of these Pokemon has some information as well. I guess I have to probably zoom in. No, okay, it remembers the zoom option. So then we see like abilities. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. We see forms. I don't even know what that means. Game indices. So in which games do they appear? What other information do we have here? How large it is. I'm not sure what unit that is in. It's a Bulbasaur. Does 7-inch make sense? Is it? I don't know. Has a bunch of moves, so it can do a bunch of stuff. It is apparently part of the species. Sprites. As a game developer, this smells like this might be an image of the Pokemon. And look at that. Looky. It is. It is the image of a Pokemon. So fantastic. So in that case, we could build an application that shows a bunch of Pokemon, right? So
consuming this API.
If we were to use Next.js, you would probably go to that documentation. Actually, I'm doing them a little disservice here, because if you are not a developer, you probably want to click on Start Learning. They have a fantastic learning path through the framework and the entire situation here, how to get started. But we want to create a new application, so I happen to have everything that I need on my computer. So there's like this Create Next app, which is similar to Create React app if you're familiar with React. So we can start creating a new application like this, and I'll just like npx. What is it called? It's Create React app, right? Next app, yes, Create Next app, and then we run this. It'll ask us for a name, which will also be the folder that it creates once it is executed, and I'll just call it Poke. I'm not sure if this is actually trademarked, so I'm just gonna call it Pokebook.
Pokebook.
There we go. It's like Facebook, but it's these elevator pitches for startups. Like it's like Facebook, but for Pokemon.
Yes, yeah. But that was a really important thing. Like you had to look up the Create React or Create Next app, because it's like all the time as a developer, committing these things to memory, you want to just have a small set that you use regularly. But other than that, you always want to go look it up.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't want to consume too much of your mind space with memory of
information to have that in your brain, really.
Yeah.
So, but here we see something interesting. I have a gigabit fiber connection, and you see how long it took to just like start downloading stuff. So this pulls in a lot of JavaScript already that we just have to be aware of. All right, so that did a bunch of stuff. Now it even tells us what we should be doing to get started. So I'll go into this basically just goes into the folder. And then you can see like there's a bunch of stuff here, and I'm not sure if I have Tree installed actually, but yeah, You see, like there is a lot of stuff.
Packages.
And we haven't written a single line of code yet.
That's right.
Right? So I haven't done anything, and I already have to deal with a lot of files. Now, let's open this folder. It's called Pokebook. So here we go. You could misread that horribly, but I'll hope that... Whoa! No. We don't want to install updates right now. Wow.
No.
Whoo! I woke up there.
Is that was it the Mac tools?
That was Mac, yeah.
Yeah.
Starts feeling more and more like Windows, if you ask me. So Next.js basically assumes that you want to build something on the concept of pages, which I think makes sense. You're probably familiar with pages on your website. We have an index page here, and that tells us already a little bit about how this works. So we are writing JavaScript, but in the end, we are having the HTML here. And if we look at how our application looks like when we run it right now, then good morning. I hope is the font large enough? Actually, I can probably make
a little larger would be good. Yeah.
Just make this reasonably large.
The shortcut is Command +, so Command Shift+.
You can also do it like this, so that now this should be easier to read, I hope.
That's better, yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay,
so they said that we should run the development server, which basically starts the web server on our machine and then makes this URL available. So I can click on this URL, and then here is our web application eventually. Come on, start. I think now it's actually building nope, wrong window. Now it's building the entire thing probably. It's not outputting anything.
It says ready.
It said ready in the command line, but this doesn't look like it's actually... Let's have a look. What's happening here? Let's reload this page because I have a feeling that this might... Why is this? There we go.
There we go.
So now we do see a little bit of stuff here. And this is a relatively boring website. And this is also one thing where I'm like, do I actually need Next.js here? Because look at, like, there is some JavaScript here that is being downloaded. We can get the size in here as well to get a better feeling for how large that is. Okay, that's 1.9 kilobytes. That's not too bad. There's a few development bits and pieces involved here as well that would not be in the actual thing. But so far, so good. 900 kilobytes for a website like this. Arguable, but probably okay. Sweet.
Arguable mostly because it's downloading JavaScript, but most of the JavaScript's not really necessarily being leveraged.
We're not really seeing JavaScript here. All of this can be done without JavaScript. Everything that we're seeing here can be done without JavaScript. But from the developer experience, I might be excited about it because I actually get to use the technology that I'm used to when I'm building more complicated applications. And if I'm using this piece of technology, the application can grow from something simple to something more complex, right? And we can now start to like change things. We can call this Pokey. I'm not sure how to get the E with the accent, so I'm just gonna cheat.
Hold E, and it gives you the option, I believe.
Okay, if I just hold E, okay. Oh yeah, look at that. I think that's the E that I want. Pokebook. Facebook. Well.
And the key here is that a lot of the frameworks work this way. It has the export there, export default function home for the component he's building for the home page. A lot of the frameworks work this way, particularly React.
That's because it's standard JavaScript. So the way that JavaScript works is you kind of build packages or components. Components means it's like one unit, whatever that is, that can be a bunch of functionality, like a user can be a component. Users can sign up, log in, log out, update profile, this kind of thing. Then that would be one component. That doesn't necessarily translate to the front end, but that's like conceptualized as a component. Here, because we're building a website, every page is a component and can be built from components, which means, for instance, you might have a login form. And you might want this login form to live on the login page as well as in kind of like drop down or maybe on the sidebar. So you can build the login form as a component and then put that wherever it needs to live. And here in this case, we have a page. In this case, it's the home page that is a component, so to speak. So now
so it's important to understand this is a convention, right? So this is a conventional layout. And at the top, you even have import. You can import another component. It's import head from next/head. So you're already importing another component up there. So this component here, the home, consists of more than one component already.
Yeah.
But it's by convention and the way files are structured that this all works.
Exactly. And the idea is that you don't have to write like configuration files on where to find things. You just have predefined places where you put things. So for instance, here you might have seen we just went to localhost 3000. We didn't go anywhere else, just like main homepage. And then by default, by convention, it looks for pages, index.js. It's kind of like the index HTML. Looks for this file, and then whatever comes from this file, whatever is returned by this component, is going to be rendered. Which means that now that I changed the header to be welcome to Pokebook.
And see, it happens without you having to refresh.
And that's because this is the development version, where as a convenience feature for the developers, it automatically reloads. So if I put this this window here and this window here, and then do like this, then it should compile this after. Correct. It compiles this, and then after it's compiled, ta-da, it updates automatically.
Yeah, as a watcher, when there's a change that happens, it recompiles, pushes it to the browser, boom. And it should be noted that, for anyone who's confused, actually localhost is a loop back to your own machine.
Yes, so this is my computer. You can't go to this address because then you would end up on your computer. Yes, and we already see like they put some effort into this to give you a good starting point. In this case, as Detlef was saying, head is being imported, which allows us to change things in the HTML header or in the HTML head. And they already put like the title and some fav icons. So we have an icon that's in this case, this little triangle here is their default icon. And they put the title in here. What did they not put in here? What as an SEO would like to see in the head? There's one thing that immediately catches my eye here where I'm like, there's one thing missing. Do we have in the chat, maybe people can like comment in the chat what's missing here?
We do have chat. Well, in the head, of course, there's things that are missing. You would want to build it out, flesh it out with all the things you would want to put into the head.
Oh.
But do we have failed to compile? Oh, okay. Yeah, you got to get the.
Let's see if this is compiling successfully now.
Yeah, because it's JavaScript. You're working in JSX.
Yes,
actually.
And you keep forgetting that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the tricks, or one of the tricky things about working in a templating language versus working in, say, just HTML. So you can't just put in a plain HTML comment because it's JSX, which is actually valid JavaScript. It's not HTML, but it looks like HTML.
It looks like HTML.
It generates HTML. Ultimately, in the end, the JavaScript takes this templating language and creates HTML out of it. So it's JSX, which is JavaScript XML.
And that's one of those pitfalls here. So I'm not sure if we got an answer.
Well, someone asked a question about double checking JavaScript as an SEO. What should I look for and sort of things?
Okay. Double check. Yeah. Basically, if you want to double check what's happening, I recommend during development to run the Lighthouse SEO audits. They are a very basic check, but if that catches something, that's something that you want to look into. Another thing is run the staging version through maybe the mobile-friendly test or the rich results test and look at the rendered HTML. Look at the rendered HTML to see if the content you expect to be there to actually be there, and that the links are actually links. So you want to have a look at the rendered HTML that is output by the mobile-friendly test to see what you get from running that. That's something
Yeah, that's
that
the
I
big
definitely.
that's the big JavaScript debugger for SEOs. If you're looking to see that the JavaScript is rendered or indexable, or the links are present so that you know that it's crawlable, that's the big one to use. So yes, what's missing here in the head? Well, I mean, there's a lot. So I mean, where do we start? So I mean, I would want to also make sure that this is properly forming HTML tags and UTF statements and viewport and things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot missing indeed. So viewport is a good one. This is not inherently mobile friendly because it's kind of missing the viewport, and also the meta description. That's something that as an SEO you kind of want to make sure that it's there. So
sure, the obvious.
As you can see, it's not like super obvious because it doesn't necessarily come up immediately, but it's something that you should definitely figure out. It's like meet all your Pokemon friends online or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a great content writer, so this is something for the content writers out there to do better. We can add the viewport. And to be honest, I would say like I can't even remember. That's like the most important part.
That's the most important one. Yeah, I think the others. It's funny that you've got VS Code, so it's automatically adding the ending on the meta.
Yeah, it tries to be smart here, and yeah.
Yeah, it's useful in other contexts, but not on empty tags.
Not on this one. Then we have a bunch of stuff here that we don't want or we don't need. It's nice that they have like the sample here, but we don't care right now. So we can do something different. Maybe we create like a list for the moment.
Yeah.
We don't need that either. Powered by fresh Swiss mountain spring water. I don't know.
It's terrific.
There we go.
But see, the developer experience here is terrific because, as you change these things, you can see it live on the left-hand side.
Yes.
Again, we were talking about, hey, there's a watcher on the project, and so when files change, the watcher triggers a rebuild and then pushes that new rebuild up to the browser. You want this as a developer experience. You want to be able to build and then see your changes live as closely as possible.
Absolutely. And that's great and that's lovely. But what if we were to create a list of Pokemons by name, for instance?
Yeah.
Right. But if we look at the API that we got here, the thing is we get a name and we get a URL for more information. The URL is kind of easy to guess because it's basically this entire thing is the same, /API/v2/Pokemon/ and then an ID. ID is also conveniently simple because it's basically just numbers that monotonously go up starting from 1, which is interesting because the first element in a list in a programming language is identified by position 0 because you start counting at 0. In this case, we would have to basically take the position in the list. This case in JavaScript, it would be element number 0, would add 1, and then we have the ID of this URL. What we can do is, I'm actually also wondering, can we guess the location of this picture? And I think we can. I'm guessing if I change the number here to 2. Oh, interestingly, we can't that easily guess it, I think, unless... No? Hold on. How are they? Oh, yeah, we can. Oh, yeah. So Charmander is 4 because Bulbasaur has 2 evolutions on top of itself. Cool. Yes. Okay, so we can guess this as well.
The first result array for the ID, capturing the ID associated with the name, and then now you've got that information. You can use the ID for all the other things from the other URL that brings you your media. So you just, this is going to be great.
And that allows us to create our own API. API stands for Application Programming Interface.
Yes.
This is actually what you see here on the left-hand side of my screen. That is an API. While I can read it because I have a nice little extension installed that shows it in a nice format, this is a lot less readable, I would argue. And it's not meant for me to read it. It is meant for a computer program to take this information and do something with this, process this.
And continue. Right.
So in this case, I should have actually named this Pokemon.js. And we now build an API component. And it's the same thing. We export some functionality. We export only one piece of functionality. In this case, that's like the default functionality here. It's a function. Let me remove the Explorer here. And now Next.js is going to execute this code whenever a request goes to a specific URL of my website, into one of these API URLs, actually. We'll see that in a second. But the important thing is this API, it's a web API. So the way that it works is someone sends a request to my API, and then I send a response back. So my function, this piece of code, my API that I built here, gets a request, and I send a response. So I have to declare these two. And it's basically just a bit of stuff that comes in from the framework, in this case, Next.js. And what I can do is I can do things like response.json, which is a specific format. It's called JavaScript object notation. You've probably seen it. It has lots of curly braces. This is JSON. What you're seeing here is JSON. Everything is like encapsulated in these curly braces, and then you have like a property name and a property value. In this case, there's a property called count, and the value is 964, which means like apparently there are 964 Pokemon, I am guessing. I'm pretty sure we can probably also do text, but I haven't tried that beforehand. I should probably have like done a test run, but let's try this out. So if I haven't broken anything, it said compiled successfully, so that makes me hopeful.
That means syntax is good.
Syntax is good. I haven't made an obvious mistake that the computer can catch. And I go to API Pokemon.
You should get the response. There it is.
I don't. It says internal server error, so text apparently does not work. That's interesting. So it doesn't like this, and I'm pretty sure response.text is not a function, so we'll just do like JSON, and we'll give it a JSON object, and we say message hello world, just to make this thing stop complaining. And now we should actually get this JSON object. Here we get it, message, and the value is hello world. Fantastic. I don't want that. I don't want that. No. What I want is, but that's our API. What I want is I want a list of Pokemon on here. And to do that, I want to use our API. So in this case, what I want is I want us to give, to get a list of Pokemon by name. I also would like to have the first character of the name uppercased. JavaScript can do that. Yeah. Let's actually first start with consuming the external API. Again, this is not our API. This is the external API. This is the Pokemon API. What we can do is we can do fetch, which means we make a network request to this API. We go here. And for now, we just leave it like this. Then we get a response. Actually, we can't name it the same. That's why I'm just like calling it R, short for response. And the response can be anything, but in this case, we know it is JSON, so we want the JSON version of it, because hypothetically, it could be text, it could be a binary, it could be anything. It could be HTML for that matter. And then we get a bunch of Pokemon. Actually, we get an API result, and that's like the entire object here, and we are only interested in this part. So I want us to take API results, and then those results that we get there, those are all Pokemon. And
what we're doing here is chaining a bunch of methods that will run in succession.
In succession.
Now the fetch, it should be noted, is that pulled in by Next, because
that is pulled in. That's pulled in by Next.
It's not pulled in by Node. If you're doing Node projects and you start writing fetch, you might not actually get it. So you might have to npm install that one separately.
Yes, so exactly. Fetch is a convenience feature that conveniently Next gives us for free. If not, we would have to install it separately. It's built into the browser. That's the way that the browser normally makes requests when you use JavaScript. And we wait. So basically what this code does is it makes this request, waits until the response comes back. Then we take the response. Then we turn the response into a JavaScript object, JSON basically. Then when we're done with that, we take this JSON object, which is this huge thing with like the count, next, previous. We don't care about these. We take only the API result.results. We only take this part of the object. And then we name this differently for us to understand what this is about. This is a list of Pokemon. I would love to say like Pokemons, but I think like the correct plural is Pokemon. But I think Pokemons makes it clearer that this is a list of multiple Pokemons. And then we can take this list of Pokemons and we can change them a little bit. The way that we can do this is by actually calling a function called Pokemons.map. What this does is I get one Pokemon, and then I get to define what I put instead. So basically, I will get, my code will run like this. I'll get this object, and then I can change the object into whatever I want it to be. And then that is put in its place. So it's replacing this object. Because here in this object, the name has the problem that the first letter is lowercase. I want to uppercase that. And then this URL doesn't really help me. I can keep it if I wanted to. That's, I guess, not a problem. So I can say I want to return Pokemon, which would be basically I'm doing nothing. But now I'm actually wanting to change something. So Pokemon.name equals, now it gets a little more complicated. Hold on, what was it? Pokemon, actually we can do it like this. This is the first character. This is the first character in the name.
Oh, okay. To uppercase.
Nice. To uppercase. Is it like this? I can never remember. And this is again a thing like where I'm just like looking it up. MDN is the Mozilla Developer Network. To uppercase, and yeah, it's to uppercase like this. So now this is an uppercase character, and then I add Pokemon slice. I cut off the first character, and so basically I take the name. I take the name, I cut off the first character, make that uppercase, and then I take the rest of the name minus the first character, and I smoosh them together. We have 10 minutes left. Okay, we'll get to a list, I'm pretty sure. And now our API should do something already. Ooh, let's see.
And it should be noted he names it Pokemons plural, but then when it goes down into the body of the function, it's Pokemon singular. Signifying that this is happening one at a time through the list.
One at a time.
Pokemons.
Correct. And now we have our Pokemons again, but we have the changed Pokemons the way that we want them. And we can now say response JSON Pokemons. So now this is the moment we do the network request to the API. We make a JSON out of it. We take the results from that big JSON. We go through each of these Pokemons one by one. We change their name, and then we take this changed Pokemon list and put that back as our API response. So if I haven't done something wrong, oh, something through unhandled problems, then no, that's not true. That has compiled successfully, but then it
cannot read property to uppercase.
To uppercase. Oh, is that
undefined,
not of undefined? That's interesting. In that case, what we can do is we can just like console log Pokemon. I'm surprised. And then we'll have a look. Maybe where did that go wrong? Let's have a look. Let's run this again. Oh, it's Pokemon.name. I'm an idiot.
Oh, we got to do name further up the. Oh,
yeah,
right
because
there.
we have the entire object.
Yeah.
Name. There we go. Obviously, when we change the name, we want to have a look at the name and not the. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very common thing that happens. Is that it wasn't as specific all the way down to the item. It was further up a parent
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah. So Pokemon was an entire object. It has the name and the URL. If I'm saying 0, it doesn't know what that means. And then something bad happens. That's what we saw here.
But hey,
so
now they're all uppercase, I think.
Uppercase, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we can also now add something to it that it didn't have before. Pokemon.image source, for instance. And now I can take this and change it around a little bit. I'll use fancy syntax here. Basically, what we can do here is, I'm wondering if I get the position in the list as well. I have to check, but I think I do. Yes, we do.
That fancy syntax is backtick stuff, which is raw, basically literal interpretation. And you get to interpolate JavaScript using the $sign curlies, which interpolates JavaScript statements you can put in there, and that's what he's doing there. Doing position +1, which is the position in the array, which would be the ID, +1 because you're counting from 0, but the actual number is counting from 1, so you have to add 1 in order to get the correct ID to map. Talking through it quickly there for you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And what I also changed is the map function doesn't only get the current item that we're looking at in the list. So again, we're going through the list of all the Pokemons. So Pokemon is 1, it's like the first and the second and the third. We also can get the position in the list starting at 0. The IDs start at 1. So we have to add 1 to the position. That's what we're doing here. And then this is a syntax that basically substitutes whatever is position +1 in this place in the URL. And if I now run our API again, we should get the image URLs as well. Here we go, image source.
Image source.
I'll probably just rename this URL to be a little more consistent with the way that what this actually represents.
Yeah.
Cool. And now this is interesting. So we have a list here, and the list currently is empty. How do we fill in this list? It turns out that Next.js has a data fetching system. What does that mean? Well, currently the data for the page, like this text, is on the page. It's static. It's a part of this page. Can we also get this information from an API? We have just created an API. How can we get this information dynamically? Because if something adds to the API, we want this page to automatically be updated. And we can look this up. They actually explain this here in data fetching. So again, just read the documentation. It's all here. And they have a bunch of examples. And here's something interesting. Remember when I told you there are different ways to do this, right? There's pre-rendering, there is server-side rendering, and then there's client-side rendering. Next.js lets you choose. Get static props, for instance. If I know that this only changes when I run the code on the server after I have created a new page or a new Pokemon. So if I control Pokemon creation, then I could hypothetically do this. I could use static generation, which means whenever I create a new website of my a new version of my website and upload it, this function would run, this code would run and generate it. That's a slightly different thing here. Or we can server-side render. So every request that comes in, every time someone opens my website, this piece of code runs and can create the data that I need. And in which case, hypothetically, this being Pokemon, and they're only changing every now and then, I would say, every now and then when there's new things coming out of the Pokemon universe, we could go with static generation, but I think as a good measure, we can start with probably get server-side props. And maybe we can then also look at the difference between the two in the way that this behaves. So I'll just be lazy now because we don't have that much time. And so that I don't have to write as much, I'll just like copy a bunch of stuff. So we now create this new function. It's called get server-side props. And we get to fill this, right? So what we can do here is we can say we want to call our API, which we know lives here. And we want to get all the Pokemons, to just stay specific here. And we want to wait for our API call to come back. So we can say, like, wait for this to be done. And also wait for this to like create us a JSON here. And then here, we can remove this. Just a comment. We can say the Pokemons shall be part of our page here. And I think, I'm not sure if I have to specifically call this out here or if I can just use it without it. I'm not 100% sure from the top of my head right now. We'll find out very soon.
We will.
Pokemons .map. And then we get each Pokemon. I'll just call it P for the moment. Yeah. And we will create an LI element, the list item element. And then as part of that LI element, I can just say p.name, for instance. And unless I have done something fundamentally wrong,
this will run.
This should run. So let's see what our homepage now says. Oh, only absolute URLs are allowed. Okay.
Oh.
Interesting. That's interesting.
All right.
I'm pretty sure I'm doing something wrong here. I'm probably missing out on how I can effectively use the API, but I can't be bothered, to be honest. Props is not defined.
Wait. Not defined. Okay,
so in
now
that
you
case,
have to put it
then
in.
when we have to actually pass it in, which makes sense. I would have not expected this to automatically do it.
Hey, there we go.
I was about to say, I made a tiny little mistake. We are getting like $1 here. That shouldn't be there. That's probably that
one there.
I don't need this one.
No.
I'm pretty sure. I do need. Okay. I don't need this one then, right?
Right.
So this is actually
right, because that's implied.
Yeah. And actually, I don't need this one either. So because we are writing JSX, we can just use brackets syntax here. So this means that there's some JavaScript running here. We go through all the Pokemons that come from the API. We take each of them, make them into an HTML LI element with the name inside, and then here we go. These are all the names. And we can be more fancy here as well. We can basically say, okay, maybe I just don't want the name. I also want an image source. And then I say p.image URL. Now it would be nice to have an, does it not like that? What does it get here? Can we inspect this? How does it look like?
I don't see the source attribute.
I don't, here. It's because that's Shadow DOM root. P.image URL is not being parsed, interestingly enough. So do I actually then have to, I guess?
Do you need the $sign there?
I think I don't. I think I don't need the, I don't think I need the quotation marks here because this is not HTML, this is JSX.
JSX.
I think that works in JSX. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Now it doesn't look fantastic, but I think like we can work with this. We can probably take this this out here. We can put it here instead. We can put this in a let's put a break first for the moment. This okay, it doesn't like that. Fine. And then we can like basically build from here. So the thing is, if we look into this now, and we have used JavaScript, you would all agree that we have just happily used JavaScript, right?
Right.
That's kind of what we did. What happens when I disable JavaScript and reload the page? Interesting, right? It still works.
Yeah.
And that is because we have chosen to do server-side rendering. So every single time we are making a request, the JavaScript runs, but it runs on the server. So what comes in here by default is not very readable, but hello, can you please? Yeah, can you please pretty print it? It doesn't want to pretty print it. Okay, that's fine. But basically all of this is present in the, you can see it here, like, right? You see here is an image. Oh, okay, now, okay, it took a little longer because it's a large page. But here you can see like this is coming straight from the server. So we are using the JavaScript framework. We're not missing any of the interactions here because we're not having any fancy interactions. But you can use the developer experience, yet get a web application that works fine without JavaScript.
So that's the big lesson there, is that you can use a modern framework that is JavaScript, and you can make it totally search engine friendly. It just so happens that a lot of the fancy features of these JavaScript frameworks allow for so much of the content to be loaded client side versus server side, or a hybrid situation with hydration.
Absolutely.
And it's you want to make your choices based around what app shell you want to ship that is going to contain the most important content so that it's search engine friendly, and reserve those things that aren't so important, that are going to be the reactive components, or the things that are going to be hydrated later or deferred. So you need to, that's the thing, is what your strategy around building apps that way. You need to draw clear lines. And of course, if there's anything that is reactive that is super important, like a notification or a chat thing or something, you need to figure out exactly how you want to power that. And it'll still be server-side rendering, shipping that to the search engine and to any user who's using it, but then hydrating the changes to that, the state changes from the database. So it's all about strategy, figuring all that stuff out.
And it's really nice that the Next.js framework lets you choose where to run your JavaScript, right? We can have things like on-click, and I'm pretty sure I can basically just have like, I mean, I can always do that kind of thing.
Right.
So you're not, there are fancier ways, like you can basically create methods on this component, and then you can have that run dynamically here. Where did I actually put that? I created a button, didn't I? Where did the button go?
Where did the button go?
Oh, right. Hello. Maybe the button needs to actually have some text on there.
Content.
It's interesting, but I'm still not, either it's not reloading, or
oh, you switched off JavaScript.
Ah, here. Yeah, I have switched off JavaScript. Right. So now that I have switched off JavaScript, nothing interesting happens. But what if I go back and actually enable JavaScript again? Yeah. That was very interesting. Like, yeah, you can run JavaScript in the browser unless you disable it in the browser.
Right.
Oh, actually, now it should have reset, but it's not doing it. Let's have a look at why the button doesn't want this. Because it has been removed automatically.
Oh.
I can't remember for the life of me. I have better things than to remember all these things in bits and pieces.
Alert takes a string. You put a number in there. I don't know if there's a type
issue. It should be fine. It should be fine. But I'm probably not seeing something obvious here. I know in React, I basically just create a function on the component. Anyway, trust me, you can run JavaScript on the client side. I just can't figure it out in the next 1 minute. Right. But basically, that's what you have available. And you write JavaScript, but you get to choose where it goes. Sorry?
There was a little question about the viewport. We had started to put that in. Right. And we can answer that real quick before we finish up, I think. We have enough time for that because it's virtual. Yeah, so your viewport, generally speaking, is every device you use to browse and connect to the internet has a screen, and that's going to have a screen size. It's going to have a max width. It's going to have a height attributes as well. And so your viewport is that device screen, which also can mean a fraction of, if you're looking on it, if you're using a desktop or a laptop and you have the browser window shrunken down to a smaller size, it's what that size is your viewport. And so in the HTML head, where Martin was starting to write that statement about max device width, is a sort of a starting. The HTML has to fit in the max width of the device. And these statements that you can put in there, there are a variety of statements you can put in there, can govern how your app is functioning inside of, say, a mobile device, whether your website can slide left or right if you if you hold it or whatnot. And so there's some statements you put in there to control how you want your app to be viewable. Do you want people to be able to expand it, for example, or not? You can force it so they can't expand with their fingers.
And that's up to you. And as it said, like there is a backwards compatible variation where it kind of just like scales it down, and that's not necessarily a good experience on most devices. So you get to choose them. I just realized that I think Next.js has it by default in the head. So that's probably why they didn't put it there. But yeah, it was good to add it nonetheless. Actually, I think I remember how to I think the way that I used JSX for the button was incorrect. How?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I only know the basics of JSX.
Oh, I need the parentheses, I think, right? Let me see if I can get that to work. Let me try this out. Maybe this does the right thing. Okay, can I? Oh, great. Now the button actually just executes. So that's not what I want. Let's try this again. So I would create a function that, when executed, alerts something.
Oh, right. You can't just...
I have this button here, and then it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't want to do this. Click me. Beforehand, it doesn't alert. Why does it not alert? Does it not do what I want it to do? There is a console log. Unclick. Ah, wow. Picky. Unclick.
Oh, super picky. Because that's not picky in the browser.
Alert.
Okay, yeah, that's not picky in the browser, but JSX has these constraints, and everything upper lowercase are very important in JSX for its processing.
Yeah, I think. Hold on. Actually, the alert visible? Because I'm not sure if it was. So we can also just document query selector button dot text content equals YOLO. I don't know, something like that.
So what this is doing is it's using vanilla JavaScript to select the button, which there is only one button, so it'll select that one. Yeah. And then when he clicks it, it should change to yellow, which you can see it there happening.
Yeah.
So the important elements of SEO that should be rendered on the server side and shipped would definitely include anything you would think of that is important for the SEO. You probably want to do your titles, although of course you can update titles with hydration, and Google will see the end result, and you will index the end result of those hydrations, not necessarily the one that goes with the app shell. But that's the kind of thinking, is that, really, why are you doing that? You should probably ship the titles generated from server side, and those super important ones, things like Open Graph and your metadata and those kinds of things.
As much as you can ship from the server, reasonably ship from the server, you should. Again, if you can't, or if there is a good reason to build a fully client-side rendered application, that is fine. We will pick these up. But the more robust you can make it, the less problems you will have in the long run. I think investing in server-side rendering is not a trivial investment. I'm aware of that. But it is one that will pay off in the long term, both for your users as well as for SEO.
Martin, it's been a terrific session. I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Has been a pleasure.
It's been great. And doing the quick Pokemon thing was excellent fun, and just otherwise shooting the breeze. So thank you everyone for attending SEO for Developers on Live with Search Engine Land. If you missed any of the presentations and want to watch them on demand, return to the Event Hub, and you can access all of the replays from there. We're planning more Live with Search Engine Land panel discussions on topics that affect developers and SEOs, working closely with developers. We look forward to seeing you then, and thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me. I hope this was interesting and gave you like a glimpse into how to build applications with JavaScript and what developers do when they do that, and that you took away some useful information. And thanks again, Detlef, for guiding us through this evening, actually morning or whatever it is in your part of the world. Evening for me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us so late in your evening.
Sure, not a problem. Have a great time. Stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy, and has been a pleasure. Bye.
It's been great. Bye.